of last year.
Wow.
So
You have a big followership.
hey, I appreciate that. We've grown pretty fast. I think partly just because it was needed. So that's the main reason. All right, we are live here. So if folks want to share this link so that people know that we're doing this, that would be great. We're live on Twitter and Facebook here at the Tennessee Holler. I'm Justin Holler, co-founder at Canoe on Twitter. I'm here with Glenn Scruggs at Glen for Senate on Twitter, and he's also on Facebook. Before we get to this interview that we're doing today that I'm looking forward to, I just want to let people know we're at tnholler.com is the website. At the TN Holler on Twitter and Facebook is where you can find us. You can also find us on iTunes. We put the audio of these shows up there, so subscribe to us there. And you can also get a notification when we go live with these interviews by clicking the bell on Twitter. And also you can ask for a notification when we put up these events on Facebook. So all that out of the way, Glenn, how are you, sir? This is Glenn Scruggs.
I'm doing well this morning. Thank you for asking.
So you're running for Senate, Tennessee Senate. You're in Chattanooga. The first thing I want to ask you about is you are the assistant police chief. Are you still the current assistant police chief?
I am. I'm actually on an off day today, but yes, I am still the assistant police chief down here in Chattanooga.
And would you continue to be assistant police chief if you were a senator?
I cannot. So I'd have to retire. I'm in my 26th year. So those things kind of butted up right next to each other. So it lined up pretty well for us.
So you're planning to retire anyway?
Well, no. So I'm planning to retire if I win.
If you win. I got you. Okay. So tell me a little bit about being assistant police chief. I mean, that's a pretty fascinating background to have. What is it like to be the assistant police chief in a place like Chattanooga? Is it Chattanooga assistant police chief?
Yes, Chattanooga Police Department. Yes, sir.
Okay, so tell us about Chattanooga and about what that job is like.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a Chattanooga native, born and raised right here. I came straight out of school, went to college, jumped into the police department. And that was 26 years ago. And I like to tell folks that I've done every job at the police department other than painting the stripes on the back parking lot. I mean, I've worked all over the place, everything from gangs to narcotics to street crimes, and now I'm the assistant chief of police. And it's one of the most fulfilling parts of the job that I've had so far. It's you get to lead a bunch of great men and women.
Okay, and now you want to go up to the legislature, and I don't know if that could, that's a different ball of wax up there. It's probably not as much of a team spirit. How do you feel like being the assistant chief of police in Chattanooga has prepared you for this job?
Well, I mean, one thing about being a police officer in general, not just a chief, but a police officer in general, you learn to deal with everybody where they are. You learn to deal with people in their place. And me personally, I work around guys who share my political background and guys who don't. And so you learn to work with all sorts and varieties of ideologies and belief systems. And I think it makes you I know it makes you a much better rounded person. So I think this job has really equipped me to deal with both adversaries and friends alike.
I think that's an important point. We've been covering them at the Holler for a little over a year now. We've seen a lot, but it's definitely important to be able to have the conversations with people on both sides of the aisle. There's sort of been, different types of legislators, the types that are standing and fighting, and, then there's the types that are working together with everybody. And it seems like you need a little bit of both of that. So tell me a little bit about the things that matter most to you. I looked at your website a little bit, but what are the issues that you find Chattanoogans care most about as you're going through this process?
So, well, with going through this pandemic, one of the things on the forefront, is healthcare. We're in an area that could have had Medicaid expanded, and we didn't. We just didn't. My opponent, Senator Gardenhire, decided to cast this lot against that. And I think this is a perfect example. Going through this pandemic is a perfect example of why we needed expanded Medicaid. And so that's one of the founding bedrock principles of my campaign, the Medicaid expansion in healthcare. And I think, like I was saying, the fact that the excuse for not expanding Medicaid at the time was, well, a lot of folks in Tennessee, have health care that's tied to their employer, it's tied to where they work. Well, that's fine if you're still working there. But as we see with this pandemic, a lot of folks have been laid off, a lot of folks have been let go from jobs. And along with those jobs, went your health care. So that's a very important part of our campaign.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I see Sharon Tharp is asking, and we can see your comments, folks. If you have any questions for Glenn, put them in the comments section. Sharon's asking if you're a Democrat. You are running as a Democrat.
I
And
am
yes,
running as a Democrat.
you should have said that up front. Expanding Medicaid, such an important thing to do. Still haven't heard a good reason for them not doing it. It costs us $1 billion a year.
Yep.
By not expanding Medicaid. We're number one in medical bankruptcies. We're number one in rural hospital closures per capita, at the bottom in opioid deaths, at the bottom in infant mortality, at the bottom in maternal mortality. All of these things could be helped by expanding Medicaid, which, if you follow us at the Holler, you know that we're big fans of and believe in strongly, and feel that not expanding Medicaid is policy murder. And then you bring up a really important point, which is we've now seen 20+ million people lose their jobs. We're always told that it's great to have employer-based health insurance. Well, it's very clearly not the solution, because you look at all of these people who are losing their jobs and now they're losing their health insurance. And we also saw not too long ago, when the UAW went on strike, the first thing GM did was cut off their health insurance. So we need to disentangle these two things. I'm a believer in Medicare for all, or something like it. Medicaid expansion is what we need to do in the meantime, but frankly, I believe we need to take it out of the hands of legislatures like this and do this on a federal level. So Medicaid expansion, I'm glad to hear you say that. What are some other things that Senator Todd Gardenhire, who, just to tell you my story about him real quick, he once tried to pretend to be deaf to me so that he didn't hear a thing that I was asking him. And that was a fun moment that I had with him. Tell us some other things that Gardenhire supports that you feel like you would differ with him on.
Well, I'll tell you what, before I jump off Medicaid, what I like to tell folks, Tennessee has over 300,000 people that are without health care. And that was before the pandemic. So I imagine that number's, exploded since then.
It has.
The thing is, for people to get a better, clear picture of that, my area has about 170,000 people. Chattanooga does. Double that size if you want to look. If you need a clear picture of the folks who are without health care in our state, it's double the size of my city. That's just not acceptable. And that's where we are right now.
Glenn, I encourage you. I think they've come to where you are. There's a group called Remote Area Medical. They give free healthcare to people in third world countries. They realized the need was so bad here in Tennessee that they do it here now. They showed up in Columbia when I was running for Congress in 2018, and I went and visited, and there were about 500 people sleeping in a parking lot at like 2 a.m. to go see a doctor, because they couldn't see a doctor any other way. They come to East Tennessee quite a bit, and you're right. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of people who literally cannot see doctors, and it just makes us all less safe. Because look at this pandemic, for instance, which is holding up a mirror to us. You see that when people are sick, we can all catch it from them. And that's not only true with this virus, that's true with a lot of things. So having people be sick puts us all at risk. And also, there's simply no moral justification for only caring for people when they have this particular virus. There's only political reasons to do that. So if we're looking at this from a moral perspective, we need to take care of each other. Healthcare should be a right. And, you're right. There's hundreds of thousands of Tennesseans who would have coverage if we simply expanded Medicaid, which Governor Lee has the right to do today. And he's not doing it. Our last Republican governor, Governor Haslam, wanted to do it. Governor Lee is refusing to do it. And he has not given a good reason for that. There simply isn't a good reason.
Because there isn't. Because you're right. There is no good reason. I mean, there are political reasons not to expand.
The reason is they hate President Obama still. I mean, that's the bottom line. They're still not over the fact that, he was president. And I'm not going to say it's racial. You take it for what it is. But, the backlash to Obama was a special kind of backlash. And, it's hard to ignore that backlash. And today, to this day, we are still hurting our own people because of their animosity towards him. So take that for what it is. We could talk about healthcare forever. I know you could too. let's talk about some other things. Like I saw you mention criminal justice reform on your website. Obviously, you have a unique perspective when it comes to that. What are some things that we need to be doing differently?
When I started this job in '94, the men that we were arresting at the time, the criminals that we were arresting, they were mature adults. We were sending guys to prison for hard crimes who were 35, 40 years old. You fast forward to 2020, the majority of the kids that are going to prison now are 19 years old, 18 years old. So that tells me that something we're doing isn't working. We're missing a huge number of kids that are coming through our education system. And so we need to reach down earlier. Most of the programs that were started back in the '90s, they were aimed at targeting middle school age kids, and some of them even targeted high school age kids for correction and intervention. If you're waiting to rescue or divert a kid from crime, you're missing the ball if you wait until they're 13, 14 years old. We need to reach down and interdict these kids way earlier. And I'm all for reaching out to kids when they're in elementary school to get them on the right path early. That's the biggest part where we're missing in our criminal justice reform piece. We're not educating our kids, getting them in the right direction.
Right. They call it, I think, the school to prison pipeline.
Yes.
And, my wife is a behavior therapist in the Rutherford County school system, and she sees, you know, they definitely give up on kids way too quickly, and that sets them on that trajectory. So I think that's a really good point. I see a few people commenting. I see Sharon Tharp says, would you consider raising the minimum wage? What are your feelings about the minimum wage in Tennessee? Is that something that we should look at raising?
I talked to a lot of folks that still are suffering and trying to figure out a way to pay rent. And these aren't folks who aren't working. I'm talking about folks who work sometimes two jobs to make just basic rent here in Chattanooga and Hamilton County. And so if a person can work two jobs and still can afford rent, there's something definitely wrong with our price point as far as salaries go. So I'm all for squeezing that thing until we can get a livable wage out of it. It definitely needs to be adjusted. Tennessee is a great location for businesses to come to. We're drawing and attracting great businesses from all over the planet to Tennessee, but it doesn't make any difference if we get them here, and the wages are below where they should be. So again, I'm all for getting the minimum wage up.
Yeah, Representative Jason Hodges just had a bill that basically said if you are going to be incentivized to come to Tennessee, you need to pay people a living wage. Otherwise, we're
Yeah.
just bringing companies here and incentivizing them, and they're taking advantage of people. So maybe that's something that you guys could work on together. Jeff Rich asks, how does a progressive win over the citizens of a state that overwhelmingly are uh, essentially conservative or Republican? I guess I would ask a bigger question. Can you tell us a little bit about your district and what the political alignment is there? I know my understanding is it's actually one of the most flippable that we're looking at in this upcoming cycle. Can you tell us
It
a little
is.
bit about your district?
We need to move about 4 to 5 points to win this race. Chattanooga, Hamilton, and Bradley are a pretty unique area, right? So the city portions of the district, they're pretty doggone blue. We just are. But as you get out into the rural areas, of course, it gets more conservative. I think to make that work and to bring those two sides together, you just bring common sense issues to the table. These issues that we're discussing this morning, they're not really partisan issues. At least they shouldn't. Everybody should be for folks having a livable wage. Everybody should be for folks having health care. Those things, I don't know how they became partisan issues, but they definitely shouldn't be. And I think to flip that district, to flip this district, what you do is you talk to people where they are and explain to them what your positions are. Explain to them how the things that you're proposing can help them. And I think people will discard the partisan rancor and vote in their interest.
I hope that's true. And hopefully having this president at the top of the ticket will get people out there. Turnout is always the most important thing. So hopefully we'll have some serious turnout and hopefully we'll have some safe elections. I know that I think Gardenhire actually had a bill to change how we deal with elections in an emergency, but it actually made elections less safe. It actually made it so that they could close polling places and have super sites, meaning more people in fewer places, as opposed
Yes.
to, vote by mail for all, which is what I think needs to happen. Uh, what do you think about elections in an emergency pandemic like this? What do we need to do? Is vote by mail for all the answer?
I think, the whole premise of corralling people to 4 or 5 or 6 super sites, as you call them, that's in my pure assessment, that's just calculated suppression. You're you're excluding great numbers of people to their voting right. I think in a pandemic or any emergency situation, we'd be crazy not to at least consider mail-in ballots.
Yeah, I agree. I think we saw what happened in Wisconsin, and now they've said there's probably a few dozen people that caught the virus because of that. That seems to be the future that Trey Hargett, Mark Goins, and Governor Lee want for us. We called them 6 times in the last few weeks. They haven't called us back, not surprisingly, I guess. But there's all kinds of voter suppression that have made us 50th in the state. So it seems like that's the future they want for us. Tell me a little bit more about the pandemic and campaigning in a pandemic. I mean, this is a unique situation, a unique cycle. How has it changed what you're doing with your candidacy?
Yeah, so I mean, it it made it challenging to say, say the least. We can't hold events, of course, and you can't go to anyone else's events because they're not holding them either. So it makes us have to be very creative about how we reach people. We're doing a ton of phone banking. I'm going to do some of that later on today. We're doing a lot of digital. We're expanding our digital footprint. We're trying to reach people in every way we can. And if that's through word of mouth, through jumping on podcasts like your podcast, we're trying every angle available to reach voters to let them know what our message is.
Well,
But it's
so
definitely made things a lot harder, and
right,
and and that's fine. I mean, the what should be paramount is people's safety, right? And so I'd be crazy to say, hey guys, we're just gonna knock doors anyway. That's selfish. People need to be concerned about their health, so we're gonna do it the best way we can.
well, people can find you at glenforsenate.com, GLENN for Senate.com. I guess I didn't see the second half of Jeff Rich's question, so I'm going to finish it for him because this is an issue that's obviously a big deal in Tennessee. And you, with your background, I'd like to ask your perspective on it. Um, the Second Amendment and gun rights issues. I know a lot of Democrats support the Second Amendment, but that doesn't necessarily mean they support everything that is happening on that side of the aisle. For instance, constitutional carry, which was the latest effort by Governor Lee and the Republicans to essentially make it so that you don't need a permit to carry anywhere in Tennessee. Basically, doing away with permits is essentially what they're trying to do. As law enforcement, what's your perspective on these issues? What's your perspective on constitutional carry and anything else you want to talk about when it comes to gun rights?
A lot of times Democrats, we get painted as anti-gun, right? It just happens almost as a knee-jerk reaction. Well, I'm a gun owner. I've owned guns all of my adult life. I enjoy shooting, and it's a recreation that I enjoy, and I support the Second Amendment. But I also understand that with that right comes some responsibility. So I don't think I've met very many police chiefs or very many police officers who are for permitless carry. I think if you're gonna be responsible enough to own a gun, you need to be responsible enough to own it properly, and so that requires training. At the very least, the state and the citizens you live amongst should know that you're capable of using a weapon and carrying it safely. And I think the whole thing with bypassing all of that to say that I'm just going to own a gun because I want to own a gun is irresponsible. So if you want to own a gun, which is your right to do, you need to be a responsible adult and own it properly.
Yeah, Governor Lee campaigned against constitutional carry and then now is for it. So, that whole thing about campaigning one way and then flipping once you get in there for political reasons, that's really ugly stuff, no matter which way you do it. I would be saying that if he was a Democrat. So,
Yeah, I mean that's
you know,
just disingenuous. You're right. I mean, if you say you're going to land one way on the issue, land on that issue and stand by it. Stand on your one. Stand on that.
absolutely. Uh, Personally, tell us a little bit about yourself, and I'm going to let you go here in a couple minutes. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Again, it's glenforsenate.com, but just what do you want people to know about you as a person, and you know how you would govern?
So one thing I'd like to express is that I'm the same person the day I got hired at the police department as I am now as assistant chief. I like to think that going through the ranks, acquiring a little bit more privilege as an officer as you go through, hasn't changed my position on anything at all. I've grown as a person, but I'd like to think that people still see me as just Glenn, just a guy from the neighborhood who they can have have a cup of coffee with or a beer with and talk about issues. I think if you are genuine in what you believe and you express what you believe, people can disagree with you, but they'll know who you are and what you stand. And that's what I'm all about. I'm about what I believe in, giving the folks in our district a voice, a true seat at the table, just to get some representation. So if you're all for someone who's going to tell you where they stand and stand by what they say they're going to stand by, I'm your guy.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. You seem like a genuine guy to me. I'm no fan of Todd Gardenhire, so I will be rooting for you. And you can find Glenn at glenforsenate.com. You can find out what he thinks, and you can reach him there and ask him questions. And hopefully down the line, maybe we can do this again as things come up. But I really appreciate you coming on here. It's a viper's nest up there, man.
Yeah,
I thought Washington was rough, and then I started watching what was going on at the state legislature, and it's a cast of characters, man. It really is. So I wish. Yeah.
I tell you what, man. In the first couple of years that I was a police officer, I got shot at by a guy with an SKS rifle. So if I can deal with that guy, I'm sure I can deal with some guys up in Nashville.
There you go. Well, good luck to you, and stay in touch with us here. And I appreciate you coming on the Holler. We're tnholler.com. You can subscribe on iTunes to get the audio of this. We'll put the video will be obviously where you're watching, and then we'll also put out some clips. And feel free to click the bell so you can get notifications when we go live with interviews like this. We're trying to lift up people like Glenn that are doing good work and shine a light on some of the injustices. So thanks a lot, Glenn, for doing this. Appreciate you.